This is part 2 of my series on old brake boosters and master cylinders. And in part 1, I talked about the problems of a failing seal in a master cylinder that can ruin a very expensive brake booster. I probably scared a few of you. I think I even scared myself. So I'm over here looking at my 300 SEL 4.5, and I want to find out if this is a problem. Brakes work fine. I've redone the calipers. I bled the system. It's holding pressure. Booster's working, but I don't know. I know somebody said, well, Kent, isn't if a master cylinder is leaking, you'll have to keep adding fluid? Not necessarily enough that you would see it. I mean, you'd have to sit here and put a little mark there and 3 months later see if it's come down a little bit. It can be a very small leak, and it can happen when you're braking hard. It can particularly happen when you pump bleed your brake system after changing brake parts, because you have all that pumping action that the master cylinder hasn't seen before, and you could be forcing fluid into the booster. So we're going to take this off, pull it back, and we're going to get down in there and we're going to inspect the inside of this booster. All right. Just pull this straight forward, and let's take this over to the bench and take a good look at it, see if we can see any evidence of this leaking. I'm going to look real close now at this pin, and all the way back into the pin I'm going to feel it with my finger to see if there's any brake fluid. Look, that's dry, so that's looking good. Notice the seal edge is also real clean and void of any rust. So this has been sealing very well. And then I can look down in there. You know, if you have a real small inspection mirror, you might be able to use it, but I just figured out something happened to my mirror and I can't use that one. But you can look down in there with a good light. You can see almost down to the bottom, and I'm looking at absolutely no sign of rust along this edge or anywhere down in the bottom of this booster. So I'm pretty happy. I think I dodged a bullet here, and I'm not going to do anything with this booster other than mask it off and try to paint it here in place. I don't want to remove it from the car because it's just too much work, but I do want to paint it for cosmetic reasons. Oh, take a look at that. That's pretty good for 50 years old. Notice there's no rust, significant rust. There's a little bit of surface rust, but you'll have a lot of rust in here if this has been leaking. I've got a reseal kit. This is something we're going to be offering, a complete reseal kit for these old master cylinders. And the first thing I'm going to do is make sure I get the rest of this brake fluid out of the reservoir. Well, there's a little bit in there. I'm going to get stuff coming out when I pull out the guts of the master cylinder, so just have a workspace that can handle the mess. Okay. And I want to show you something else I'm going to be doing. You'll have to admit that this doesn't look very pretty. So look what I've got. Haha, a nice new reservoir. Isn't that going to look nice on that 109? And we're going to have to make sure it gets into both chambers. There we go. Check security of your hoses. They're not going to come out, all right? Now, the bleeding process begins. It's slow in, slow out. Slow in, look at that. I'm still getting air in that rear one. Okay, there you go. We're clean. Now we have a challenge, and that's how do we get these off and get this over to the car and get it installed without all this brake fluid leaking out. If the brake fluid leaks out down past the bottom of this tank, you're going to have to do it all over again. You can see I've lost a little bit of fluid overnight from this sitting on the bench. You know, just a little bit of seepage out of these fittings, but not much. So now we're ready to set this in place. You want to make sure that O-ring is in place here. So we're ready to install this. You can imagine how much fluid you would lose if you didn't have the right tools and supplies here. I still laugh about that guy who did a YouTube video and said he had to run over to the car real fast. He didn't even have plugs. He was just kind of holding his fingers over the holes to get this installed. Okay, next one. The little green wrench. You don't really need this. You can use the steel wrench, but I think that's just the cutest thing ever. You can see you want to go back and forth so you tighten that down evenly. And now I can grab my B-nut wrench and tighten these fittings. So now I can go ahead, take the cap off, fill this up, plug these wires in, and bleed the brakes. It obviously looks a lot better than when we started. It also acts a lot better. I think that old master cylinders are a lot like old shock absorbers. You know, you get used to that slow deterioration. You don't really realize your shock absorber is bad until you get a new one. You realize how tight it is. It's probably the same with a master cylinder. You'll start to lose some of that firm brake pedal feel, and over time it just gets kind of more spongy. So if you have a master cylinder that's 30, 40, 50 years old, you might want to consider changing it out before it fails or before it ruins your booster. Now, I had a lot of fun with this project. I mentioned possibly doing reseal kits. I don't know if I'm going to do that. It depends a lot on how expensive these master cylinders are. One of them is now between $200 and $300 for certain models in the 70s, and that may justify a reseal kit just because of the economics. I came up with this brake master cylinder bleed kit. You won't see anything like this anywhere in the world, especially with this custom green wrench. This will be included with all my master cylinders that I sell, as well as any reseal kits I come up with. And I will be providing a full 30-minute detailed video on how to do this yourself.